Think motor racing, think big engines, big money, big names. But it wasn't always this way.
Now it's time to look at the first race of the major motor racing event of the New Zealand season, the ShellSport Saloon Race. Let's go back and see how things are progressing as they attempt to clean up the Bay Park Raceway.
I think in its day it was the most magnificent thing that ever happened.
That's the way it was, ShellSport. It was a very good series.
For a time, the premier series in New Zealand was all about these cars.
Guys ran Alphas, Fiats, Minis, Escorts, all sorts of things.
The ShellSport series. From 1978 through to 1985, these were the cars. Cheap, lightweight, high-revving screamers running half an inch from the tarmac. But there was one make that just pips the others when it comes to all-out ShellSport supremacy. The ShellSport Datsuns. These were the cars to beat.
Summer's day yesterday was very, very hot indeed.
And although there were a couple of people that said that the punters wouldn't be interested in anything that wasn't big banger racing, the ShellSport series did actually provide New Zealand with some of the closest racing it had ever seen. The fact that a Datsun won 5 out of the eventual 8 championships is probably not the best indicator of just how close it was. Motorsport was getting expensive, grid lineups were dwindling. ShellSport made racing affordable again.
You could run them on a shoestring, because the guys that were running them were 8 to 5 workers. They were on the floor, they were toiling at the bench, and they weren't making gazillions of dollars a week. And you didn't need gazillions of dollars to run them.
It was professional level racing on a hobby grade budget, but the drivers took it very seriously, perhaps no more than the most successful ShellSport driver, Reg Cook.
Oh, Reg's whole way of looking at motorsport is professional. His team were about one of the very first to come out dressed in proper clothing, not scungy old t-shirts with a name printed on them, proper polo shirts.
Even more impressive than his clothes were Reg's cars. We decided to track some of them down. When I called Reg, this was the car he wanted to talk about, the Cherry, the car that launched his ShellSport career. In recent years, it was the pride and joy of Timaru driver David Brown, who was responsible for its restoration. His son Richard has no doubt why his father was so keen on it.
Well, yeah, the only really reason he even sort of looked at it was because it was an ex-Reg Cook car. It's certainly not the most attractive looking car that Datsun ever built.
Tragically, David had a fatal heart attack behind the wheel early last year. Richard has taken it on himself to bring the car back.
We've had a lot of support. Even Reg has rung us and offered support.
Richard says the car's racing days are over, but says it will be remembered as a car that punched well above its weight.
Yeah, well, the car it was a bit of a giant killer. It competed against a lot of bigger cars, Valiant Chargers and even Porsches and things, and it certainly didn't disgrace itself.
But for the 1980 season, Reg decided he did need a bigger car, the 160J Triple S that he would win the championship in. It's been through a few different owners since then, and a few different paint jobs, but no one else was able to replicate Reg's success. This footage shows the car jostling for third at Bay Park in 1984. Despite looking like a real contender, this particular race didn't end too well.
Into the 1300 start. One from Warren Bird and Kieran Wills. Smoking
Kieran
the
Wills
there.
braking too late there, off backwards, nearly into the fence, but the stand doing a marvellous job of stopping.
Today the car is looking a bit sharper, still sporting the original body, with Reg's modifications still in place. Reg took delivery of this car as a brand new rolling shell, a blank canvas, as it wasn't going to stay stock for long. It's a marvel of engineering. The first thing you notice about the engine bay is just how far back the motor sits. The trade-off for the resulting awkward gear stick position was supreme balance on the track. This film shows the car at Levels Raceway earlier this year, locked in a tussle with another ex-ShellSport Datsun coupe. Current owner Lynn Hatton has had the car since 1995, and like Dave Brown and his Cherry, thought the car would look best in its original Works Datsun livery. And with good reason. This is of course how the car looked when it won the championship, and as ShellSport wound down as a series, it'd be fair to say the car never looked quite as good on the track. Despite Reg's success with the 160J, he put together an all-new car for the 1981 season, the famous Sanyo Sunny, a car which showcased all of his engineering experience to date. Recessed motor, all-new rear suspension and lifted chassis rails gave the car speed and a stance that could behead ants. Reg would later race the car with a black colour scheme. This is the car at Manfield.
In the Fisher Nissan, Reg Cook will try and talk to Reg as he lines up, waiting for the start of the ShellSport race. Reg Cook, are you hearing us?
I'm with you, Tony, no problem at all.
Sitting on the grid there, what does it feel like, Reg?
Well, I'm on the pace this time. I'm on the front row and number 2 slot, and my adrenaline's starting to get going.
This film shows Reg in 1984, the last year he would race this car in ShellSport.
And we're expecting a good ShellSport race.
Today the car is in pieces. It's being restored, again in the famous blue, red and white colour scheme. Owner Steve Parker says there's too much history in the car as it is to do a bare metal nut and bolt restoration, but says he's keen to tidy it up and race it again.
When we got it, it was all right, but it was in a bit of a state. And to do it immaculate, you'd want to take the floor plan out and start again, basically. But we wanted to keep it with all the wrinkles and, you know, the welds and how it's been put back, and, you know, it's all original.
But Steve says he remembers the car more for its success in rally sprint than in ShellSport.
We're down to the qualifying order of 32. Let's start with the first of those now, which is Reg Cook.
Reg himself says the Ashley Hill climb did more for his profile than any other event. Of course, having it televised live on the only TV channel helped. Reg says he was signing autographs all the way home.
Very quick time for Reg Cook.
But the crowds loved ShellSport, and though Steve was just a kid, it definitely made an impression.
It's the whole thing, childhood, you know, you've been brought up with this sort of stuff. And, you know, your parents used to take you to the car racing and you'd see the Datsuns go around all the time, and it was just amazing, just blew you away.
And you had to have fun. This wasn't a job, this was the drivers doing what they loved.
But you'd never live on prize money in this country. You do it more for love than that, love of the sport.
And although ShellSport was the premier race series of the day, the prize money would perhaps only cover your entry fee and a couple of sets of tyres. That, however, didn't put a dampener on the competitiveness one bit. And now it may be coming back. The man behind the move to revive the series is John Goby, a familiar face around the tracks. He plans to have it up and running again by next year.
The reaction has been very good. A lot of guys are interested, a lot of guys that weren't in it before have rung me up.
People like Mark O'Keefe, who didn't get the chance first time round.
I never had the opportunity or the money to get into it, so I've always had a thought as a kid to get into it, and this is why the car's here, hence.
And John says it's lucky so many cars have survived.
Well, they were like anything in them days. You couldn't really give them away because no one knew what to do with old race cars.
I found it in a hay shed. You open the doors, had to get the chooks and everything out of the thing. There's eggs laid on the seats and shit. And got all that out of it and cleaned it up, and we actually found a race car.
John Goby himself has quite the collection of old ShellSport cars. He plans to race his ex-Warren Steel Bluebird once he gets the revival off the ground. But he says there will need to be rules to ensure the same good close racing.
Really, it was just sort of, they were so competitive in them days. But we're talking new technology now, so they're getting more herbs out of the motors. They've got better brakes, better suspensions, better everything. And you go down to local chemist and you get some go fast pills and those down your throat.
And Mark O'Keefe thinks he's on the right track to capturing a bit of that golden age of motorsport.
Nowadays you can get a production car virtually off the showroom floor, and you don't have to do much to it to make it a racing car. Whereas a Datsun, you've got to build it to make it a racing car, to keep up with anything. You've got to use spanners and stuff like that, whereas laptop computers and stuff like that you don't use in these old girls.
And John says it's time to get the cars and the characters out of the garage.
We're all one big happy bunch, because I think they're now saying, well, okay, you know, it's we're all older, wiser, and let's get into classic racing and get these things going again.